I think people imagine that crime writers have really dark, twisted minds, and in fact, that's absolutely true. I think we are all probably slightly warped. I haven't always been a writer, as most authors. I started as something completely different, and in fact, I did 12 years in the police force before I became a writer. There are so many cases that when I was a police officer, even before I was a writer, I thought would make incredible stories. And sometimes those cases were just too unbelievable to be true. I remember being on CID and dealing with a kidnapping, and one of the ways this poor victim was rescued was by writing a note on a £5 note and managing to throw it out of the window of a moving car, where it was discovered and handed into the police. And years later I thought I could use that, I could write about that, but actually it's almost too strange to be believed. And I love reading about true crime cases where they're so extraordinary and the characters are so grotesque and monstrous that you almost can't believe they're true, and yet they absolutely are. In fact, for my first novel, it was a real life case that sparked the idea. It was a real life hit and run that happened in Oxford when I was a very new police officer. And I haven't written about what happened to that family and in that case, but what it did was it generated an idea completely different to the real life case. I think when you're writing bad characters, evil characters, you do draw on lots of your own experience, not necessarily because you're evil, but perhaps because something bad has happened to you. And so what you're doing is you're subverting your experience and writing from the opposite point of view. From my point of view, I was drawing on the experience of being in an interview room as a police officer, talking to people who had committed terrible, terrible crimes, remembering how they looked when they told a lie, remembering how defensive they got when they felt that they genuinely were in the right despite the terrible thing that they'd committed. And so all of that experience went into creating very, very unpleasant, bad characters in my fiction. Crime writers must like writing baddies, otherwise we wouldn't. I like exploring being inside the head of someone really bad. My second book, I See You, was about stalking, and I spent a lot of time on the London Underground, walking around, not actually stalking people, not actually following people, but observing people and trying to imagine what it was like to be someone who was looking for their next victim and what might be going through that person's head. And it was quite a terrifying prospect, but really quite exciting to write and quite a challenge to write as well. I think we're all fascinated by crime because I think we know that we all have it in us to commit a crime. It's the same experience of going on a roller coaster. None of us want to be on that roller coaster forever, and if we were trapped on it, it would be an absolutely horrific experience. The enjoyment comes actually from the contrast between the roller coaster and firm ground, and that moment where just before you're about to go down the big dip or up the big hill, where your heart is racing and you know that you're safe, but actually your body is telling you that danger is coming, and that's a real thrill. And it's the same sort of thrill I think we want from crime fiction and indeed from true crime. I think truth is always stranger than fiction. You only have to look at reality TV shows, documentaries, read the newspapers to see what's going on in real life. There are atrocities and peculiarities happening all around us, so all we have to do as writers is write about them.